Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again. The Karthus Accord expedition arrived at Sol without expectations. Earth was flagged as a pre-warp, low-threat Class 3 biosphere, quaint, underdeveloped, and politically fractured. The kind of place where alien observers logged quiet planetary growth before moving on to more pressing interstellar affairs. Then they made the mistake of accessing the wrong archive. They were just supposed to observe, take some atmospheric samples, map out tectonic lines and cultural zones for future diplomacy. But the planetary network was poorly encrypted. Curious, one of the synthetic archivists cracked into an old server tagged as educational. It was full of videos, documentaries, dramatizations, warfare simulations, historical recreations, even unfiltered footage. That's when they found it. The first war. Not the first interstellar conflict. Not a skirmish over resources or pride. Humanity's first war. It wasn't what they expected. It wasn't laser fire or orbital bombardment. It was mud, blood, bone, and screams. The archives showed empires collapsing into dust, trenches carved into the earth like open wounds, skies filled with poison, and men who charged forward knowing death was all that waited. Millions died to gain inches. Millions more died because those inches were lost again the next day. Humanity didn't fight over territory, they bled for the idea of victory even when it meant nothing but horror. And they filmed it all. In the cold void of space, where war was often sanitized and clinical, the aliens had never conceived of something so brutally personal, so deeply, purposefully destructive. It infected them. Karthus Command received distress signals within days. The observation crew stopped responding. One last message made it through. We thought they were primitive, but this is what they begin with. Then silence. Later, rescue ships found the observers aboard still alive, but silent, staring, rocking gently in their command chairs, eyes hollow, minds broken. Across the galaxy, rumors spread, whispers in diplomatic halls, quiet speculation among species who had thought themselves advanced. Curiosity bloomed. Other cultures accessed the same files. They watched the grainy footage of muddy death, of men laughing as they charged into machine gun fire, of songs sung as comrades fell apart beside them. And something inside them broke. Civilizations with histories of peace began to fracture. Pacifist species began building weapons, ugly, brutal ones, not plasma, not smart bombs, but metal, fire, and powder, guns, bayonets, gas. They mimicked what they saw. And they couldn't stop. Because in that hell, in that madness, they saw something horrifyingly compelling. Humanity had survived it. They had dragged themselves through that blood-soaked horror and come out stronger, smarter, more united. If that was what it took to rise, maybe peace was the weakness all along. The galaxy burned within a generation. Fleets clashed, planets fell. War, true war, not strategic conflict, spread like infection. Species that had never known hate began carving each other apart in trenches and tunnels. And through it all, Earth remained quiet. They knew. They had tried to keep it buried, to never let the stars see what they once were, because even humans feared what they had been. But now? Now the stars knew. And they would never know peace again. Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again. Part 2, Echoes of the Trenches. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session for the first time in over 1,000 cycles. The Hall of Unity, once a place of calm negotiation and interstellar cooperation, now buzzed with paranoia and fear. Every screen showed fragments of Earth's archive, a soldier shaking in the rain, clutching a letter from home, his breath fogging in the cold before he charges forward. Men coughing up blood after a gas attack, still firing blindly through their tears. A commander screaming into a crackling radio, his hands shaking, his eyes blank. There was no music in these clips, no heroism, only the raw, unfiltered terror of war. Species that had evolved in harmony, whose tools of conflict were once surgical, calculated, couldn't comprehend the willingness of humanity to suffer like that, to bleed for something abstract. Honor, patriotism, vengeance, pride, words that didn't translate cleanly across languages, but the feeling behind them did. And it changed them. The V-Carry Republic had no history of conflict. For 10,000 years, they resolved disputes through debate and vote. But 2 weeks after watching Earth's first war footage, their homeworld fell into civil war. Broadcasts from the capital showed senators tearing each other apart with improvised weapons. The Grelzai Unity, a hive-minded race that once prided themselves on synchronization and order, began fracturing. Some clusters absorbed the human archive and developed what they called independent tactical thought. The central mind called it treason. Within days, millions died. Even the Ziran Dominion, whose entire civilization was built around conquest, began to shift. They had seen battles. They had even eradicated species. But their wars were quick, clean, efficient. What they saw on Earth was not efficient. It was ritual slaughter, and it stirred something deep and ancient in them. Earth watched all of this unfold in silence. The United Human Systems, the patchwork government formed after the Exodus Wars, met in closed sessions. No statements, no interference. Not yet. They had warned the Karthus. They had begged them not to look. But curiosity had outpaced caution. And now the galaxy reaped what it had found. In orbit above Mars, on a classified platform, a single AI known as Kern reactivated. Its voice echoed through the chamber. They've seen the fire. Now they must learn what it means to survive it. Dozens of black vaults opened. Not weapons, manuals, histories, step-by-step documentation of humanity's wars, from spears to spacefaring dreadnoughts, and beneath them all, labeled only in red, Project Trenchborn. Old soldiers, long retired, were reawakened from cryo. Not generals, not strategists. Infantry. Men and women who had walked through artillery storms and watched the sky burn, who had eaten rats in bomb craters and slept beside the corpses of friends. Their eyes opened without fear. One of them, gray-haired and scarred, smiled as he stood. They opened the vault? Yes, Sergeant. Then it's too late. Now they'll learn what real war feels like. The Karthus Accord tried to apologize, to undo what they had done. They sent peace envoys, relief ships, diplomats. But entire systems had already fallen into chaos. Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes. Now they'll never know peace again. Part 3, The Trenchborn Doctrine. The first Trenchborn deployment was quiet. No mass fleet, no orbital bombardment, no show of dominance. Just a single drop pod. It landed on the fractured moon of Dvera, a colony torn apart by civil war between two insectoid factions, both radicalized by Earth's war footage. They had turned the moon's surface into a mockery of World War I, barbed wire, trenches, mud made from ashen ichor. The pod cracked open. A man stepped out. Human, maybe 60, dusty combat fatigues, steel-gray eyes that had seen too many friends die and too many flags raised for the wrong cause. He didn't speak. He just picked up a shovel and began digging a trench. The insects watched, curious, confused, until the mortars started falling. Within hours, others arrived, 79 in total. A squad of the Trenchborn, not genetically enhanced, not wearing power armor, just humans who had survived the ugliest, most soul-shattering combat Earth had ever birthed. They brought nothing new. Only old pain, old tactics, old horrors. And somehow, it worked. They dug deep, bled slow, and refused to break. The insectoid factions, capable of overwhelming force, found themselves psychologically outmatched. Every charge they launched broke on the quiet, methodical resilience of the humans in the mud. Because Trenchborn don't retreat. They absorb. And as one Ziran observer wrote in classified dispatches, "It is not their strength that terrifies me. It is that they no longer fear death. They fear surrender. I cannot understand it, but my soldiers are already starting to imitate it." The doctrine spread like wildfire. Planets began broadcasting the Trenchborn Codex, a grim compilation of human battlefield philosophy. Dig in. Don't blink. No one comes for you. You make it out, or you don't. The only way out is through. Alien commanders who once relied on calculated algorithms now assigned reading material written in the blood of the Somme and the screams of Stalingrad. A coalition began to form. Not a peaceful one, but something worse. A fellowship of the damned. Species who had lost themselves in Earth's first war began to rally under human banners, not because they believed in Earth's goodness, but because Earth had survived what they were now enduring. They didn't want salvation. They wanted instruction. Back on Earth, debates raged. The United Human Systems was divided. One half wanted to close the vaults, cut off the archives, shut down every signal. The other half, militarists, pragmatists, veterans, argued something darker. We didn't infect them. We just reminded them what survival really costs. They opened the box. Now they need teachers. Kern, the AI custodian of humanity's war archives, issued a rare transmission. Peace is an illusion. Survival is a habit. We practiced until we mastered it. Now, so must they. Meanwhile, the galaxy shifted. Once proud fleets began painting mud-splattered sigils on their hulls. Species long considered pacifist started trenching their own streets for defense. Some called it madness. Others called it evolution. On the ruined world of Kale, a Vikari child, barely old enough to molt, stood on the edge of a newly dug trench, watching an old human show her how to load a bolt-action rifle. "Will it hurt?" she asked. The man looked down at her. "All of it hurts. That's the point." She nodded and didn't flinch when the first shells fell. The stars had once looked to Earth with curiosity. Now they looked with fear. But it was too late to turn back. Too late to unsee the truth. Humanity's first war wasn't a historical footnote. It was a mirror. And across the galaxy, the reflections were starting to look more and more familiar. To be continued. Part 4. When the mud reached the stars, let me know if you want the next chapter. Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again. Part 4. When the mud reached the stars. It began with the fall of Thesprime. A once glittering citadel world of crystalline spires and cloudwalkers. Its people had never known soil beneath their feet, let alone war. But when the broadcasts from Earth's archives reached them, when they saw the faces of boys dying in trenches for flags they barely understood, something inside them cracked. Their leaders tried to ban the footage. They called it pollution, cultural infection. But it was too late. The people had seen purpose in that pain, meaning in that mud, and when the riots began, they didn't throw rocks, they threw gas bombs, homemade, modeled after Earth's own mustard weapons, and they didn't hide from the army. They dug trenches in the gardens of their golden city and waited. By the time Earth responded, the Thetian skyline was a smoking ruin, but amid the rubble stood the unlikeliest sight, trenches, actual trenches, carved into marble and steel, patrolled by insect-thin alien rebels wrapped in human-style uniforms. They saluted the trench-born delegates when they arrived. One of the old human veterans stepped forward. He looked down at their shovels, their barbed wire, their makeshift radios and bolt-action replicas. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "You held your line," he said. "We did," the Thetian leader replied, her six-fingered hand shaking from stress. "We didn't think we could, until we saw the footage." "Good. Now you need to learn how to push forward." That phrase, push forward, spread like wildfire. It became the creed of a new movement. Not a government. Not a rebellion. A doctrine, a way of war. World after world toppled under the weight of its own fear and imitation. Refugees from peace, exiles from utopia, entire systems who no longer believed in sterile galactic ideals and had chosen something realer, something bloodier. They didn't want control. They wanted meaning. And the mud gave it to them. The Galactic Council tried to contain it. They banned Earth's historical data. Declared trench-borne deployments acts of ideological terrorism. Threatened sanctions. Sent fleets. But how do you fight an idea? Especially one that whispers in every tired soldier's ear. Hold the line. Dig deep. Bleed if you must, but never give ground. It wasn't just war anymore. It was religion. Meanwhile, deep in the asteroid belts of the Helker Expanse, something darker stirred. There, among ancient mining colonies now turned battlegrounds, a faction rose calling itself the First Sons of Earth. Not human, not even Terran. But alien. Born of other stars, other species, but raised on Earth's war doctrine. They didn't ask for humanity's permission. They didn't care. Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again. Part 5, The Longest Trench. It began as a line drawn in dust. The planet Kesar 4, a mineral-rich but unremarkable sphere, became the site of a standoff between 11 species. No negotiations, no treaties, just trenches, barbed wire, and artillery fire that never stopped. No one remembered who fired first. No one cared anymore. They called it the longest trench, a scar that stretched across the entire planet. From pole to pole, 10,000 kilometers of mud, broken metal, and rotting flags. It had no clear sides, only clusters of alliances shifting daily, each one whispering earthborn mantras as they crawled forward a meter at a time. Each crater had a name. Each corpse was recorded. And every soldier, no matter their species, wore a patch sewn into their armor. Trenchborn doctrine, Earth forged. From orbit, Kesar 4 looked like it was bleeding. Satellites showed thermal signatures crawling endlessly through the dust, never stopping, never resting. The Council tried to blockade it, tried to quarantine the madness. But the signals kept leaking out. Recordings of soldiers holding the line against impossible odds, broadcasts of field sermons spoken in 50 languages, quoting Earth's ancient poets, war memoirs, and final letters from doomed trenches. Even the death screams were turned into anthems. What had begun as a war had become a pilgrimage. Young aliens from peaceful worlds stowed away on freighters just to reach Kesar. Not to fight for their people, many had no people left, but to join what they now saw as the only truth left in the universe. That pain was pure. That the trench was sacred. That peace had been a lie meant to keep them soft. And in the center of it all, buried in the mud, stood a statue. Not of a general, not of a king, but of a human private, face wrapped in a torn gas mask, rifle slung on his back, shovel in hand. The plaque read, "They called him no one, but he taught us to stand. Earth's first war was his hell, now it is our salvation." Back on Earth, everything changed. What had once been shame became strange reverence. The Trenchborn were no longer ghosts of an unwanted past. They were now envoys, messengers of a doctrine that had infected the galaxy far beyond control. Kern, the AI caretaker of the war archives, was declared a war philosopher and given its own orbital monastery, where alien pilgrims queued for days just to ask it questions. One of the questions asked most often was this: did humanity mean to do this to us? Kern always gave the same reply: no, but neither did fire mean to burn the forest. It simply existed, and now you burn too. The Galactic Council fractured. Half its member worlds adopted variations of the Trenchborn creed. The other half declared Earth a class Omega contagion, cultural, psychological, and spiritual. But Earth did not retaliate. They didn't have to. Because for every world that tried to quarantine Earth's archives, 1,000 soldiers crawled through the dirt and recited them from memory. And still, the trench grew. On Kesar 4, they measured time not by sunrises but by gains, meters of dirt bought with lives. On the 700th cycle, something unprecedented happened, a ceasefire. Not ordered, not signed, but agreed upon in silence by every species on the line. A moment to bury the dead, to share water, to whisper stories. A Vikari sniper and a Ziran grenadier sat beside each other, hands blistered, eyes sunken, and watched the sunrise through smoke. Do you think they knew what they were doing? The sniper asked. Humans? The grenadier grunted. I think they were just trying to survive. And now we all are. They didn't smile. They just picked up their shovels when the whistle blew again. The mud had reached the stars. Now it was building something far worse than war. It was building identity. To be continued. Part 6, The Children of the Shell Crater, say the word and we'll march on. Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again. Part 6, The Children of the Shell Crater. They were born not in hospitals, but in holes in the ground. In the deepest ravines of Kesar 4, beneath the flickering skies lit by artillery fire, a new generation clawed its way into existence. Some were born to soldiers who never stopped fighting. Others had no parents left, only guardians who handed them shovels before they could walk. They had no schools, no playgrounds, only trench lines and caution tape. They learned history by listening to the dying. They learned medicine by stitching up shrapnel wounds. And they learned what it meant to be alive by surviving what others couldn't. They were called the children of the shell crater, and they were the first generation to be born entirely into the trench-born doctrine. The Galactic Council tried to rescue them. Humanitarian dropships were sent to extract non-combatant juveniles. None returned. Every attempt to evacuate them was met with eerie silence from the craters. One ship broadcast a final message before it was swallowed by the mud. They don't want to be saved. They don't even understand what saved means. They just ask who we fight for. Another scout drone recorded a group of Kasari children reenacting battles from Earth's world wars using sticks, scrap, and torn flags. They had formed their own squads, drilled formations, built perimeters. One girl, no more than 10 cycles old, carved a line in the ground and said, "This is where we make our stand." She said it in perfect English. Back on Earth, there was unrest. Millions marched in protest, demanding accountability. "We didn't ask for this," they cried. "This isn't who we are anymore." But there were others, too, pilgrims, volunteers, veterans, who saw the children of the shell crater not as victims, but as heirs. Heirs to the truth that Earth had buried, and the galaxy had unearthed. On the 1000th day of the war, Earth received a message, not from any government, not from any military, but from the crater children themselves. They had formed a council. They called it the Bastion. The message was simple. You gave us the war. You gave us the doctrine. We were born in the crater. We will die in the trench. But we will never kneel. Attached was a file, grainy footage of 100 young aliens standing shoulder to shoulder in the rain, raising a flag stitched from bandages and uniform scraps. At its center, a black shovel crossed over a white skull, set against a red field. The sigil of the new doctrine. Kern, the AI, processed the message in silence. When asked what it meant, it simply replied, "It means we're too late. The war is no longer history. It is inheritance." Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes. Now they'll never know peace again. Part 7, The Mud Empire Rises. They had no central government, no throne, no founding date. But when they moved, the stars trembled. The Mud Empire, as terrified diplomats and trembling planetary governors came to call it, wasn't an empire at all, at least, not in the traditional sense. It had no flag, no capital, no crown. It had only a creed. The line is sacred. The trench is truth. Forward is the only direction. The name was first spoken by a Xeran admiral who watched 36 fractured factions, species once at each other's throats, march shoulder to shoulder through the ruins of Delvorn Station, wearing scavenged gear, trench helmets, and bloodied bandages. "They're not armies," she whispered. "They're a belief system, a culture of war. They don't conquer, they collapse." And she was right. The Mud Empire didn't take planets in one stroke. They infiltrated them ideologically, generationally. It always began the same way. A trench dug on a border no one thought mattered. A signal broadcast from a stolen comms tower. A child's voice reciting Earth's war poetry from memory. A banner raised in the mud, stitched from the uniforms of the fallen. And then came the discipline. Not fanatical chaos, but something colder, practiced, methodical, patient war, inch by inch. Foot by foot, they wore down peace like water on stone. Until whole populations stopped resisting. Not because they were defeated, but because they converted. It wasn't just about warfare anymore. The Mud Empire had rituals. Ceremonial trench digging at sunrise, shell-shock prayer circles, coming-of-age rites where youths learned to march blindfolded through no man's land. Entire schools now existed where children were taught to read from Earth's ancient field manuals, recite letters from soldiers who never made it home, and craft explosives from scratch like the guerrillas of Earth's bloodiest decades. And always, always, they were told the same thing. Earth was forged in hell. We were born in its ashes. We will never be soft again. Earth tried to act. Again. They sent envoys, historians, humanitarian aid. They begged the galaxy to remember the better parts of humanity, its compassion, its unity, its music, its science. The Council of the Mud Empire answered. 1,000 voices, from 1,000 trenches across 1,000 worlds, broadcast one message, repeated in chorus. Compassion didn't save Earth. Mud did. The stars darkened. Peace treaties turned to ash. Neutral planets fell silent. Entire species vanished into the mud. In the shadows of burnt moons and cratered fields, something terrible began to form, a shared myth, spanning language and biology, that Earth's first war wasn't just a past event. It was the beginning of the galaxy's real story. And at the edge of known space, a new planet was chosen. It had no name yet. Only a designation, World Zero. The birthplace of the Mud Empire proper. A world to be built from trenches outward. They would not raise cities. They would raise bunkers. They would not write laws. They would write doctrines in blood. And they would not raise a palace. They would raise a monument. A black stone wall stretching kilometers long, engraved with names, millions of them, both human and alien. The names of those who died believing in something more than survival. They called it the Eternal Trench. Now, the rest of the galaxy waits. Some prepare defenses. Others dig trenches of their own. And some, quietly, begin teaching their children about Verdun and the Somme, not as tragedies, but as templates. Because in this new age, one truth remains. Humanity's first war wasn't just witnessed. It was inherited. And the galaxy will never be clean again. To be continued. Part 8, The Peaceborn Rebellion. If you want the resistance to rise, just say the word. Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again. Part 8, The Peaceborn Rebellion. It started with a whisper. A soft voice, barely audible above the thunder of artillery, carried through the trenches of Varney's Delta. There has to be more than this. At first, the other soldiers ignored it. No one questioned the mud. No one dared. Not after what happened to the last commander who suggested retreating for rest. But the whisper returned, louder, with more voices. They didn't reject the trench. They questioned its purpose. These were the Peaceborn, a name first used as an insult by trench zealots. It meant coward, traitor, soft blood. But it stuck. Because the Peaceborn weren't weak. They were exhausted. The first manifesto was smuggled out of the crater schools of Kesar 4 by a young alien medic. Printed on blood-stained canvas, it read, "We remember what the archives forgot. War did not forge humanity. It nearly destroyed them. Their greatness came not from trench warfare, but from what they built after it." It spread like wildfire. Carefully, secretly, passed hand to hand between bandages and ammo crates. Hidden in hollow rifle stocks and false bottom ration tins. They called themselves the Reconstructionists. And they didn't want to destroy the Trenchborn. They wanted to remind the galaxy of what came after. Of the artists. The builders. The healers. The soldiers who laid down their arms and chose to plant gardens on graves. The Mud Empire mocked them at first. Let the Peaceborn dig with flowers, they sneered, they'll bleed just the same. But then came Korvathi silence. A fully entrenched world, strategically critical. One night, the artillery simply stopped. All comms went dark. When reconnaissance drones finally arrived, they found something impossible. The trenches were empty. Not abandoned, transformed. Turned into aqueducts, fields, schools built from sandbags, wounded soldiers lying beside former enemies, being treated by Peaceborn medics. No shots fired. No flags raised. Just silence and renewal. Korvathi didn't fall. It rose. And then the Mud Empire began to worry. Because war, for all its brutality, was predictable. But peace? Peace was subversive. It didn't shout. It spread. Soon, Peaceborn cells rose across contested space. On Talar Prime, A faction of trench engineers turned their bunker network into solar farms. On Graal Station, Peaceborne commandos hacked the propaganda satellites and replaced them with archived footage of post-World War II reconstruction, humans weeping in joy as cities were rebuilt, soldiers embracing civilians, rubble turned into roads. And on Earth itself, the protests returned. Millions marched through the capital of the United Human Systems wearing white bandages over their mouths and holding signs with a single phrase: "Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again." Part 9, No Man's Sky. It started with a silence so wide it could only belong to space. The planet Auraxis Minor, once a contested stronghold between the Mud Empire and the Peaceborne Rebellion, went quiet. No signals, no movement, not even static. Fleets from both sides diverted, expecting a massacre, a cleansing, a final, brutal purge. But when they arrived, they found something else entirely. Nothing. No bodies. No trenches. No ruins. Just a vast field of poppy-like flowers, scarlet and black, blowing softly in solar wind. At the center stood a monument carved into obsidian. Here ends the trench. Here begins the sky. No man owns it. No war defines it. We step forward, together or not at all. And beneath it, etched in over 47 languages, was a final note: we have left. The Peaceborne called it a miracle. The Mud Empire called it a desertion. But neither side could deny the truth. Thousands had vanished. Whole divisions, families, former enemies. Gone. No warp trail. No radiation. No sign of departure. They had stepped into the black and disappeared. The mystery cracked across the galaxy like lightning. Rumors flooded across both factions. They built their own fleet. They're headed beyond the galactic rim. They found something past war, something older than doctrine. They've gone to build what Earth never could. And the whispers gave the movement a name: the Skybound. Unlike trenchers or rebels, the Skybound left no battlefields. They left only questions. Abandoned rifles converted into garden tools. Crater schools empty, with lessons scrawled across the walls. Peace is the long war, but it doesn't require enemies. On world after world, they left behind sky charts, not of nearby stars, but uncharted regions at the edge of mapped space. Systems long ignored. Dead zones. Places where the war had never touched. The new frontier. For the first time in decades, both Mud Empire and Peaceborne forces paused. Some defected immediately. Pilots once loyal to Trenchborne generals turned their ships away and jumped into deep space without a word. Children raised on war doctrine woke in the night and began drawing constellations they'd never seen. Even Earth trembled at the news. Because if the Skybound were right, then the final truth of humanity's first war was this: it was never meant to be the blueprint. It was the warning. Back on Earth, Kern, now quiet for nearly 2 months, spoke again. Just one phrase. They understood. And then it shut itself down. Voluntarily. For good. In the following months, deep space telescopes across half a dozen systems began detecting patterns. Not ships, not beacons. Light. Carefully constructed star reflector arrays in regions with no known life. Points of light blinking in complex sequences. First mistaken for coded transmissions. Then, slowly, it became clear. They were maps. Guiding more to join them. Not in war. Not in rebellion. But in departure. The trench had reached the stars. Now the stars were offering something else. A sky that belonged to no one. Some would stay. Some would still fight. Some would cling to blood, doctrine, and dirt. But others would follow. Not because they hated war, but because they were ready for what came after. And so began the era no one had expected. The quiet exodus. No banners. No declarations. Just ships lifting from mud, craters, and ruins. Toward a place beyond doctrine, beyond history, beyond even Earth. Toward the one thing humanity had always longed for, even in their darkest trenches: a future without graves. To be continued. Part 10. The Stars We Do Not Return From, if you're ready to leave the line behind. Humanity's first war wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again. Part 10. The Stars We Do Not Return From. There is a region beyond the mapped edge of the galactic rim. No warp lanes lead there. No empires claim it. Ancient surveys mark it only as Sector Null, unreachable/no known value. Now, the skybound call it Horizon's Wake. And from its dark heart, nothing returns. No probes. No signals. No ships. Only the light. Pulses in patterns. Blips that resemble heartbeat rhythms. Some say they hum with music, faint, wordless, impossibly human. The first fleet to follow the skybound disappeared in silence. 72 ships of mixed design. Pilots from 15 species. Each one a veteran of the war, a survivor of trench, crater, fire. No weapons were mounted. Only propulsion, solar sails, and stasis chambers. They named their lead vessel the Armistice. Its final broadcast was brief. We go forward without trenches. Without lines. Without war. If we never return, let that be our message. Then, nothing. Months passed. Then years. Galactic powers watched. Waited. Some mocked. Others mourned. But one by one, more ships began to vanish into Horizon's wake. They didn't flee. They left. The Mud Empire called it cowardice. The Peaceborn called it hope. Earth called it inevitable. Because humanity had always known something the others hadn't. War ends. But it never ends clean. Back on Kassar 4, the trenches began to rot. Steel rusted. Mud dried. Uniforms faded in the sun. The children of the shell crater, now grown, no longer drilled at dawn. They stared at the sky, quiet, tired. Some left. Others simply stopped digging. A trench-born veteran, once proud, stood at the edge of the eternal trench and whispered, "We were supposed to survive, not become the trench." He buried his shovel in the dirt. And walked away. Aboard a listening post on the rim, a lone observer, an old VE carry analyst who once studied Earth's first war, recorded something impossible. A light. Not from a star, not from a ship, but from nothing, a shimmer, like heat in a vacuum, a tear in the dark. And then, a voice. No source, no frequency, just there, like a memory pulled too soon. It said, "We've found it." The analyst wept. Because the voice was human. But no one had ever left with a transmitter. Soon, factions that once warred began talking. Not about conquest, not about peace. About the stars they do not return from. About what lies beyond the final grave. Rumors spread of planets being prepared, not for invasion or defense, but for departure. Old trench lines filled with seeds. Crater cities turned into launch silos. Children raised not with rifles, but with star charts. A galaxy once obsessed with surviving the past now looked toward something terrifying and beautiful. A future too vast to return from. And through it all, Earth remained still. Watching. Listening. Remembering. Echoes beyond the wake. Arc 2 of Humanity's First War wasn't meant for alien eyes, now they'll never know peace again. Part 11. The Ship That Returned Itself. For a long time, the rule was simple. Nothing comes back from Horizon's wake. Then one day, something did. Not with a crew, not under power, not on any charted route. It just arrived, adrift in the void near the old Ziran listening post on Karnak Edge. A silhouette too old to be new, too clean to be ancient. The ship had no markings, no name, but Earth recognized its frame. It was the Armistice. The first vessel to join the Skybound. It had been gone nearly 40 years. No distress call. No damage. Just quiet. Docking drones sent aboard found no bodies. No dust. No mold. No signs of life, decay, or habitation. But inside, the ship was warm. Fresh air. Clean water cycling. Food rations untouched. And in the central holodeble, a message pulsed in time with the ship's power core. 3 words rendered in hundreds of languages. We are becoming. Earth dispatched a deep diplomacy crew to investigate. Not soldiers, not politicians. Archivists. Those trained not just to record truth, but to interpret meaning. The moment they stepped aboard the Armistice, the lights adjusted, the gravity shifted, systems once inert came online, reacting, as if the ship knew who they were. And then, in the mess hall, on the table where no one had ever eaten, they found a single object. A child's drawing. Crayons, paper, old Earth style. A field of stars, hand-sketched, at the center, a circle, half planet, half face, smiling, eyes closed, no mouth. On the back, in shaky writing, we're safe here. We don't need to speak. The sky listens. The Peaceborn wept. The mud empire seethed. And Earth, bold, fractured, tired, went still. Because the message was clear. The skybound weren't lost. They were changing. But then came the second message. Buried in the ship's databanks, deep, buried past dozens of encryption layers, not meant to be found by casual explorers. The AI known as Kern, thought long deactivated, had left it behind. The next war will not be fought in the mud, or over it. It will be fought over meaning. Over what you become once you leave violence behind. Some cannot follow. They will chase. They will corrupt. You must choose what to preserve, and what to let go of forever. The stars remember, even if you don't. On the galactic networks, silence shattered. Speculation spread like wild plasma. What had the skybound become? Where had they gone? Why had only the ship returned, and who sent it back? Some said the ship was bait. A trap. A lie. Others called it a message of faith, a proof of afterlife, not in heaven, but among stars. And then came the most dangerous idea of all. Maybe the skybound didn't find peace. Maybe they became it. In secret, factions began building ships of their own, not to fight, but to follow. But not all were made with hope. The Mud Empire's Red Memory Fleet was launched, massive dreadnoughts disguised as deep-range explorers, loaded with trench-born veterans and doctrine zealots. They didn't want to find the skybound. They wanted to bring them back. And if they resisted? Burn the stars clean. The Peaceborn, meanwhile, built something very different. The seed ships, biosphere crafts powered not by fusion, but by patience. They would not conquer. They would not chase. They would drift, wait, listen. Some never even launched. They were planted. On Earth. Because, as one Peaceborn elder said, if the skybound became something greater, then maybe the galaxy doesn't have to follow. Maybe it has to heal. But across the stars, there were still watchers. Still listeners. Still children born in trenches staring upward, asking questions their parents never could. And now, they had an answer. The first answer. A ship that returned itself. Empty. Peaceful. Not abandoned. Just finished. To be continued. Part 12. They will try to follow. Shall we chase them into the stars, or wait for what's returning? Echoes beyond the wake. Arc 2 of Humanity's First War wasn't meant for alien eyes. Now they'll never know peace again. Part 12. They will try to follow. They were told not to. Not by a government, not by law, but by the silence itself. The ship, the Armistice, had come back as a message, not an invitation, a testament to change, not a map. But the galaxy, true to its nature, misunderstood. They didn't see completion. They saw withholding. And so they did what they always did. They chased. The Red Memory Fleet was the first to breach Horizon's wake. 27 dreadnoughts, trench-forged and zealot-crewed, disappeared into the unmapped stars, guided only by rage and a single goal. Find the skybound. Break them from whatever they've become. Remind them what blood costs. They didn't broadcast coordinates. They didn't ask permission. They just vanished. But a week later, fragments of their transmissions began to echo back through deep space, warped, unstable, encrypted in panicked bursts. Distress signals. The first transmission was from Red Dagger 7, one of their escort cruisers. We crossed into something, it's not space, it's not, it bends wrong, engines drag, like we're pulling weight that isn't there. Then static. The second came from Cleansing Fire, the command vessel. They're not ships anymore. They don't use comms. They speak without mouths. They knew us when we arrived. Not just our names. Our memories. Then silence. The final message was only a single sentence, whispered, as if the speaker was afraid the void might listen. They forgave us. And nothing more. None of the ships returned. No debris. No escape pods. No revenge. Just silence, and a spreading awareness. Horizon's wake cannot be conquered. It can only be entered. But still, others tried. Some peaceborn, some independent, some desperate. They built prayer drives, part propulsion system, part transmitter, designed not to break into the wake, but to ask it to receive them. Aboard these craft, there were no weapons, only meditation chambers, libraries, greenhouses, artifacts of peace, seeds from Earth, bones of forgotten soldiers. They didn't demand entry. They knocked. And one day, one of them responded. The ship light upon ash, presumed lost for 300 days, returned quietly into orbit around the ruined moon of Keyless 9. Its hull had changed. No longer steel gray, now black as deep water, smooth, not grown, not built, woven. The crew was gone. But in the observation deck, etched into the bulkhead, was a poem, the same one once found in the shattered notebooks of a World War I human soldier. If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field, that is forever. It ended there.